Good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon. No, it's not morning. It's afternoon. In fact, it's going to get dark soon. Hi there. Sue Smith sitting in for Aaron Rand. Aaron will be back with you tomorrow. And we got a lot of news to get through today because a lot of stuff is going on in the world. And we're going to turn our eyes to Paris because that's where Prime Minister Mark Carney is. He's in Paris today for a meeting about the future of Ukraine. Carney is one of about 30 leaders in attendance to discuss a possible ceasefire and reconstruction of Ukraine. They've got a lot on the agenda, actually. But the meeting, of course, comes on the same day as Nicolas Maduro, who was the president of Venezuela, appeared in a New York courtroom after he was captured and ousted by the U.S. military. It was quite a weekend. Roger Hilton is a former Montrealer. He works as a non-resident fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. That's in Vienna. And he's been watching all of this. Good. I guess it's evening to you, Roger. We'll hit all the morning, afternoon, and evening.
Hey Sue, hey Montreal. Sue, it's very dark here, like the international outlook I have right now. So looking forward to getting into it.
Oh, are you? Okay, well, tell me a little bit about. You know what? Let's start with Venezuela. What's been going through your mind as you've been watching the ouster of Maduro?
Well, I think, the immediate aftershock of what happened and the way things have transpired, a lot of what's gone on and Trump's really belligerent responses about sort of dominating the Western Hemisphere and a new Monroe Doctrine. I think we're very much in the early phases of this. I joined CJD on Saturday talking about this. And as he said, I think if I was in Cuba, I would be quite nervous at the moment. It's still a bit interesting how Mexico has stayed out of his crosshairs, considering that in reality, all of the drugs and sort of the pretense for this as a narco state is coming south of the border has been out of play. But just some wild language, Sue, talking about the Colombian president also being a narco terrorist. Yeah. And, very upsetting for me here in Europe is sort of the talks when he was on Air Force One coming from Mar-a-Lago about, them needing to have Greenland, and some, Stephen Miller, his deputy chief of staff, his wife, posting soon, it will be American. So a lot to unpack. Maduro is in court today, but it's really just gobsmacking, how the year has started off. I didn't have that on my bingo card.
Same. I was saying at the beginning of the show, my head was kind of in eggnog and thinking resolutions. And this is, as you say, dark, certainly very sobering. All right. Well, I'm not sure where to start. I will say we are going to be speaking to a Colombian Montrealer a little bit later on about, as you say, that belligerent language coming out of Trump about South America. But I know that there is this meeting now that's going on about Ukraine. So I'm wondering, how this is going to affect those talks, because it now seems to be, if we weren't sure about this before, we are now in a world where anything can happen and Trump seems to be able to do whatever he wants.
Well, yeah, sorry, you just broke up there a little bit, Sue, but I'll just sort of give some immediate reaction. I think the meeting itself has been put on the back burner a little bit compared to what's going on. And again, my reading of the European press is everybody's been much more startled about Trump's reigniting his prospect of wanting to take Greenland. When it comes to Ukraine, Zelensky said earlier in the week that they're 90% there. But again, it's the way I measure it is not what Zelensky says, but it's the level of patience that Trump has with trying to force a peace deal down Zelensky's throat, and as well as the level of disruption. The only good piece of news over the weekend, apart from the Canadians coming back against the Stars, was that at least Trump did say publicly that the assessment was that the Ukrainians didn't try to assassinate him, which sort of knocks him down a little bit. Right. So these are unbelievably small victories, but this last 10% that's really sort of holding up the peace deal, specifically on the security guarantees and the length, who's going to control the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, Zaporizhia, and the land concessions. This all of the Donbass he wants, and Ukraine's very precarious position with these four cities, the citadel that they've built, about how that would look with the special economic zone. Zelensky has negotiated in good faith. He has really moved it over. And of course, I have absolutely no optimism, Sue, about this moving anywhere. And I think, Zelensky has said if this fails, the Ukrainians will keep fighting, without this really critical 10 to 20% intelligence and hardware that America is providing to them.
Mm-hmm. The one name you haven't mentioned in all of this is Putin. And it does seem that Trump has not been able to prevail upon Putin to make any concessions at all.
Yeah, I mean, just again, in Putin, I mean, he also sort of, this was a bit shocking to him that, they went in and they took one of his client states in Venezuela,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it was a beachhead in Latin America. And also, I don't know if it got reported in Canada, but the US Coast Guard is chasing an apparently sanctioned oil tanker that is flying under the Russian flag.
Yes.
So, despite protests from, Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, saying this is ours, the Coast Guard is still going after it. So, it's at least one way where Trump is saying, well, I'm happy you called, but we're not interested in it. The fact of the matter is that Putin doesn't want peace. They sent 200 drones or 200 projectiles over Ukraine on New Year's Eve. They've aggressively been attacking Odessa, the major port city, sort of to cripple the economic lifelines. Since the fall, they've been knocking out all of the power. Trump knows this. There's some hawkish people in his cabinet, like Marco Rubio, who I think do stand behind Ukraine, are losing the battle on it. But
Hmm.
it sounds insane, Sue. But the way we kind of got to get Trump back on track on this is sort of floating the idea of him being in the conversation for the Nobel Peace Prize. So it's just Russia is on the advance. Ukraine has massive manpower issues right now, despite deploying two new Patriot systems. But it's a very, very difficult time right now for Ukraine, which should be a bit slower, despite it being the winter season, which
Yeah.
meaning slower.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you mentioned Marco Rubio, and he went on the offensive on the weekend, and I don't know if that played in Europe, but really defending and saying, look, this is our backyard, and Venezuela is full of really bad actors, including Russia, including China. I mean, named, out loud, along with Hezbollah and all of that. So it does seem that the U.S. is willing to take some action against Russia. I feel like I haven't drilled down enough from you on, and you've mentioned it a few times now, the reaction in Greenland about Greenland. Can you tell me what people are saying in Europe about this?
Yeah, so just for the listeners, what I want to say is while, Putin did lose, let's say, material or financial losses with Venezuela, the overarching trend of what happened is actually a net win for him. Because if Trump is pursuing this Yalta worldview of perceived spheres of influence among great powers, any day of the week, Putin will take a lost tanker or access to South America for the idea that Europe is Russia's backyard and that they have a priority on it.
Right.
So it's actually quite scary stuff when you look at it. The same thing applies to Taiwan or other smaller powers. On Greenland, you have to tiptoe around it a little bit. I think the Danes have done an unbelievably admirable job,
Hmm.
both trying to de-escalate the rhetoric, saying we are all on the same team or on NATO. And before Trump 2.0, the Danes, a founding member of NATO, was one of the most reliable members. But of course, this can only go so far. Trump appointed the governor of Louisiana as the special envoy to Greenland, which
Yeah.
is beyond farcical. But behind the scenes, they've been trying to work. They've been heavy investment in civilian infrastructure. They've gone on a spending spree on defense to sort of, as they say, address these issues about Chinese and Russian boats floating around. But today, as I said, the Danish prime minister came out in full throttled way saying this has to stop. And this is after numerous times, Sue, where Copenhagen has summoned the American ambassador saying, guys, we understand that this is important. Let's work together economically on the rare earth minerals. But yet, it's just not sufficient for Trump, who just craves more and has absolutely no respect for international law, it
Hmm.
seems.
Hmm. Well, there's been some discussion here in Canada about how serious his threats are about the sort of 51st state. I'm guessing the Europeans are taking Greenland pretty seriously.
Yeah, again, I told you you're calling me here. It's a quarter to 10 in Austria, and it's very dark out. But I mean, the buildup in Venezuela from a military standpoint, you saw this for months, where they had, aircraft carriers and they deployed a lot of troops. So I mean, if this actually picks up steam, and I'm not even talking about Canada right now. I mean, there's only 57,000 people in Greenland. So I mean, it really wouldn't take that much American hard
No.
firepower to take it over. But if they wanted to do it again overnight, the Americans have proved to have exceptionally high operational security, OPSEC, where nobody knows about this,
Yeah.
or how everybody was caught off guard. We had our massive conference going on when they took out
Yeah, I
Iran
was
with
just going to say,
the
remember Iran? It
reactors.
was just like,
Yeah,
what? They just started bombing.
yeah. Yeah, and again, it's my daughter is keeping me up, so I'm reading the news. But this is also now proving to be a big split with
Yeah.
MAGA, right? You had Thomas Massey from Kentucky, who was the one pushing for the Epstein release files, and he's saying in less than 1 year, Sue, look what has happened, right? I mean, two interventions, covert influence operations in Greenland, a special envoy. And it is quite scary. I think everybody needs to recognize that while Trump doesn't respect international law, he's not beholden to anybody. He's
No.
not going for re-election. Most of his advisors are just yes men. And the only thing that in any way keeps him sane or keeps him honest is the stock market, as we
Money.
saw with the tariffs and bonds. So, as I said, they have to really, really glean his vanity, this Nobel Peace Prize, and money, 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 right?
Huh.
Saying, if you work with us, there's rare earths there. We've upgraded the port infrastructure in the north for your military base. But as I said, all of this infighting and these comments, I mean, it's really just, Orthodox Christmas is in 2 days. And it's just an early present, a stocking stuffer for the Kremlin.
Oh, wow. Okay, that is dark, Roger. But
It is.
yeah, reality check. Listen, thanks so much as usual for your perspective. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And just for everybody listening, just stay confident and just buckle up for what is going to be an unbelievably wild
Oh my
2026.
gosh.
January 7th, there's reports of a false flag attack, with Russians hitting their own population and making it look like Ukrainians. So let's hope, Zelensky's new chief of staff, and maybe the midterms in a while will restore some order. But as I said, buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
And I hope you get some sleep. I hope your daughter lets you sleep.
She doesn't, but she's the best. So all the best back home, guys, and thanks always for listening to me.
Okay, Roger. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao. That's Roger Hilton. He's a former Montrealer working as a non-resident fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute in Vienna. And he did make the point several times that it's dark where he is. And certainly that was a pretty dark outlook.
Canadian women are looking for more out of themselves, their businesses, their elected leaders, and the world around them.
And that's why we're thrilled to introduce the Honest Talk podcast.
I'm Jennifer Stewart.
And I'm Catherine Clark. And in this podcast, we interview Canada's most inspiring women.
Entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, politicians, and newsmakers, all at different stages of their journey.
So if you're looking to connect, then we hope you'll join us.
Listen to the Honest Talk podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you listen to your podcasts.